to SENSESPACE. This morning I'm here with Jonny Drury. Jonny Drury. And Jonny is an autism coach. He's a practitioner of dialogue of a certain variety, and he works for an organization called Dialogica in the UK. And I had the absolute pleasure of meeting up with Jonny Drury last summer in Bergerac, where we had some lovely pain au chocolat, and I chatted with his wife, and turned out to have a whole range of interesting little connections and interests in our lives, amongst which dialogue is a very important and interesting one. So welcome, Jonny. Great to have you on SENSESPACE, and please feel free to embellish and correct my introduction and share a little bit about what you're doing, what you're passionate about, and let's go from there.
Thanks, Jacob. Maybe there's some little interesting gremlins in your voice there, mine as well. It was good to meet you last year in Bergerac, and that was an amazing thing because I was running a little podcast thing at that time, and then to find out that you were actually just down the road from me in France, about half an hour away in the French countryside near Bergerac. That was beautiful serendipity. So yeah, that was lovely meet-up we had, consequently. Since then, I've been keeping tabs on what your podcast, and we've kept in touch. And I'm back in the north of England now, my hometown of Sheffield, and slightly reluctantly, but French bureaucracy kind of dictates how long we can stay there at the moment. But being in the countryside there with the good Wi-Fi, obviously, has been amazing because of the sense of space, and I'm getting enough nourishment from the work I do online as well while I'm out there. But being back here is good to be reminded of how important it is to spend some time in physical what's the word? Proximity to others. Absolutely, yeah. So we're here virtually now, and just that's what's come to mind. It's coming to my mind quite often, and the importance, the energy transference is very, very different for me when I'm with another person. I can smell them and see around them, and maybe not smell them, but that whole presence using the senses comes into play, So that's a big part of my work is presence. That's a big part of, always has been part of working with people. Yeah. And lots has been going on in the world of work. I don't know where to start really, because it's just it's quite complicated, but it's going really, really well. And Dialogica, very fortunate to be one of 7 directors. We've just had a bit of a kind of a real need to review exactly what it is we're doing. We realised that we had too many ideas and we didn't have the resources to run them all, so we've stripped it right back to the original intention, which is the Autism Dialogue Approach. And all my other projects, I don't know about anyone else, but everybody's got all their different projects. But my other projects, which I try to bring into Dialogica as an activity, has been setting up a mindfulness for autism program, and coaching as well, one-to-one coaching. It would be nice to have it all like neatly packaged into the Dialogica offering, and we tried, but that's not going to happen just yet. So I've got 2 or 3 different work things going on, including working now 2 days a week for the Anna Freud Centre in London, doing some really important work with the NHS, work that really aligns with my values and that of Dialogica as well, training health professionals in autism awareness for mental health. So that's one of the things that I've got going on.
Yeah. Well, you've got quite a bit going on.
I know, too much. I forget. Oh, don't get me started.
Yeah, well, I think it would be certainly of interest to me and possibly listeners just to hear a little bit more about what autism is and how it is that this form of dialogue, this dialogue, seems to be quite grounded in presence. And as far as I've heard from your work, works with the principle of emergence, how those two things wed together, why that's important for engaging with autism. And yeah, I know that you really work at foundations of what autism is and rethinking that. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think it's always important to bring in the personal story, because it plants it in the present moment. And for me, it was self-inquiry all my life, since I was a youth, since I was a kid, actually. I was asking questions. What is this? What am I doing here? Why are you all behaving like that? Why have I got to go to school? Why are there rules? And where we lived as a kid, it was on the border of a city in the countryside. So I had loads and loads of freedom, but then come home and it's like, no, it's Monday morning, off you go to the mind factory called school down the road. So a lot of conflict I was really aware of. And anyway, my story panned out like a lot of people in the Western Hemisphere. We turned to different ways of trying to keep awake, trying to keep alive and happy and healthy. And so there was quite a long spell of psilocybin, mushrooms, cannabis. I call it my 5-year party. And then I realized that wasn't going to take me where I wanted after those years. And I hit a rock bottom. Sudden, it was really sudden. Like in one instant, I can remember the actual moment. I realized that my life was being destroyed. I was kind of imploding. It was the most horrible feeling, and I needed something else completely different. 2 weeks later, I met a Sufi sheikh, a Sufi Master, Sheikh Nazim al-Haqqani, Turkish, genuine Sufi Master. He was doing a tour, and he'd actually came to Sheffield. And I was handed a flyer by one of his people in the town that day, and I went along. And that evening, my life was changed. Another sudden, listening to him talking it was like he was talking to me. As 200 people in the auditorium. So I suppose this is like a dialogue, starting here. A kind of a spiritual dialogue with my sheikh. My master, who was my sheikh while he was alive. I think I still consider him my greatest teacher, but he died nearly 10 years ago. Anyway, yeah, it was like he was talking to me directly from that seat, and because things I'd thought about deeply in myself, and things I might have shared with 1 or 2 friends in burning the midnight oil about existence, it was like he knew exactly all of it. And so I thought, right, I've got to go down this road and find out more. And I went headlong into becoming a Sufi, Naqshbandi Muslim Sufi, and I didn't know what I was getting into really. That's a whole another story. Fast forward 20 years, the scaffolding kind of dissolved. So no longer a Sufi. I found myself in Sheffield as a fine art grad. I always wanted to do fine art. At the same time, I was putting on improv gigs and extreme music kind of nights, and a little record label. I had a lot of angst that I found and I could release in this music. And so I was promoting and playing at the same time. So yeah, but that explosion of creativity kind of replaced all the. It was the opposite of what Sufism was. So my experience of being a Sufi is that it's interesting because I read a quote this morning. If you put in yourself, man who enslaves himself can become free. And I just picked up a book at random, a Sufi book, opened it at random, and that was the quote. And that encapsulates what I feel. Take it living fully away. I don't like to use the word religion, but away fully, like becoming, ordained, as to use a Buddhist terminology, and going for it. And there's something happens. So I learned so much, and it gave me so much. But in the end, the outer ran its course, and then I ended up exploding with creativity. And it was on my fine art degree I was introduced to Bohmian dialogue. And so then we went on another journey from there into the depths of dialogue and how it can be used for service. So I'm very, very grateful to have had that introduction and devoted my life to it, to helping others with dialogue.
It's really, really striking how something in that image of like building the full structure and living into it and being surrendered to it, being a slave to it in a certain sense, and then having it kind of crack open and dissolve at the end. There's something, I don't know, quite beautiful about that to me. It feels like it in some sense it ought happen in that way, that you kind of you immerse yourself in a school or a way of thinking or a philosophy, and you conform yourself to it, and then at a certain point you let all of it go, and see what sticks, see what comes back, perhaps.
And I've just realized I think the main part of your question was about autism, and so
well, we're getting there. There's quite a few legs on the road.
I suppose my point is about self-inquiry, and autism is from the word, it's autos, Greek, the self. So that's why I started off, unpacking the whole self-inquiry thing, and that fast forwarded to like 2016, 17, when the words autism dialogue just came into my head. Oh, okay. Been introduced to dialogue, this mode of communicating in a group. Autism was ascribed to me by the powers that be, the NHS, when I was this what happened after the creative explosion. There was an integration needed to take place, and I just gave up after a few years of a couple of catastrophic failed business attempts. I gave up and went to my GP. I said, what am I doing wrong? Actually, it wasn't as simple as that, because someone had suggested this thing, Asperger's. And so I did a bit of research, and I did the little test online, and I was taking it all with a pinch of salt. went to GP, showed him, wrote this big list out, showed him that, he referred me, and then they said, yeah, Asperger's. And then it was the idea Autism Dialogue came to me. So Asperger's was taken out of the manuals in 2014. I was one of the last people to get it in the UK, but they said that you can still use it. You know, the authorities, you can still call yourself Asperger's, but now it's just all autism or some spectrum disorder or condition. But to me, I had this dialogue approach, which I'd been using a little bit with kids, homeschool kids and refugees in a gallery setting when I came out of uni. And the government cuts put an end to that. So yeah, so after trying business, the idea for Autism Dialogue, which to me, the self and the enquiry, the Dialogos, the meaning making. I thought, oh, that's interesting. A self-enquiry, isn't it? Autism Dialogue. Let's find out what the West wants to unpack about this thing we've called autism. What is behind that, you know? And when a lot of the groups that I facilitate, that is the question which I gently introduce into people, into the circle. You know, and it always transpires anyway, because everybody's got a different interpretation of what it is. There's all the like, you know, the traits and the research, and I respect all the research and everything. Well, not all of it by far, but it's still not actually that determinable what it is. So what I do is I allow people to hold up the mirror to themselves in a safe environment and ask themselves, what is autism? You ask yourself and share what you're thinking. We share it. We'll do this together, you know. And mostly it's about recovery because of the deficit model, the predominant neurotype, the way that predominant ways of thinking, languaging, being in the West. I'm gonna just use the West as a scapegoat. It's everywhere. But then once people realize that they don't have to carry this thing, this deficit, you know, stigma-laden crap, and then they start to merge into realizing that it's more about me as an individual, unique person, which is what all the rhetoric says anyway. You know, I mean, it's all well-meaning, the support, but it's quite it's not very results orientated, the support that so-called autistic people get. So that's kind of like when my counselling and coaching modalities come in. And, you know, the whole idea of coaching and counselling is that the client knows the answers, and the facilitation of that is what's important. Does that kind of...
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, I really love the kind of etymological bonding of autism and dialogue that you laid out there. This idea of autos as self, and autism does seem to be tied up with a distinctly different sensitivity, a different phenomenological experience of life. And I guess the link that I'm gleaning from what you've said is that sensitivity that autistic people have is that sensitivity outward is also connected with the inner, the self relation, the inner inquiry, the self knowing, and the different quality of outer knowing, the sensitivity to light, sound, distinct dynamics in the social field, all of these things that an autistic person might be able to sense differently to other members of their community. I wonder then, like, getting the off the book NHS definition of autism and this kind of approach to it that is more like an invitation to an inquiry, to philosophical opening. Like, how would you sort of distinguish those two ways of holding what autism is? And like, where do you see, what are the real important blind spots in the dominant paradigm that describes and assigns the title autism, as you say, from the standpoint of neurotypical ways of thinking and being that are, also based on history and cultural context and the way we do education and the way we say this is what work is. And, there are people who say these kinds of neurodivergent types in indigenous cultures would be naturally drawn into particular roles in the community, shamanic roles and different kinds of things. And then there are others who see this as really just purely a kind of disability that is like on the rise and a product of something going wrong in our environment, some sort of negative environmental affects is causing a rise in autism, and this is basically fundamentally not a good thing.
I mean, I was surprised to see the rise of autism referred to as an epidemic, and there's, when I was doing my postgrad in autism at Hallam, Sheffield Hallam, 6 years ago. You've suggested quite a lot there, and I think what's really interesting is the roots of our consciousness and being in the West. It seems to be fragmented. It seems to be that, and this was my experience, I was explaining as a kid, there's something existential about this. My questions were, why am I evolving as a fragment of my environment? Could be like a subtext to my question. Why am I often feeling separate? Okay, so the establishment, society, God bless it, would say, "Oh, you're wired differently. We've got a name for that." Oh, right then, have you? Okay, why am I different? Different to what? Are you saying there's something wrong? Or, so, you can talk about the deficit model and the social model of disability, that they're quite helpful to a degree. What is Western society driven by? Largely, is it the Industrial Revolution, capitalism? Is it Cartesian reductionism? Being able to take things apart so you can see how it works. Because to me, living in a whole way, where you feel whole, one feels whole with one's family, with one's community, in a traditional sense, that we thrive among each other. There's so much mental illness, and my Sheikh Nazim, he said, cities are like giant mental hospitals. They should have a sign as you go into the city, a sign saying, welcome to the mental hospital. I mean, he had a way of talking, which was brilliant. What I'm really enjoying at the moment is hearing about modern, not modern, but yeah, sort of quite recent philosophical developments. So somebody I'm working with, Hannah Diego, she's advanced the whole enaction theory of Francisco Varela, and with colleagues developed a proposal called participatory sense making. And she and her colleagues have been working in autism as well for a number of years. I'm not pretending that I understand a lot of the writing, but definitely worth looking up. Some of it is really accessible, and I'm very fortunate to be going to Vancouver next month to work with UBC and Hannah presenting some work which is it's like a hybrid of her work in interacting across differences and autism dialogue as well. So she's got an actual methodology, and we've created a whole day which has got university credits attached to it. It's a big moment for us, really, because because we're developing our own training to launch later this year. I'm not sure whether I've answered all of that, but yeah, you touched on some deep stuff there.
Oh, I congratulate you on like actually formulating this in a way that can be brought to bear into training and into universities, and that's no small task.
Thank you. And I mean, it's been a long journey, and I'm really grateful to finally in my 50s now to have something that I can use and be useful with for people, for those, at least, if I can help a minimum amount of people to stop suffering a little, and just for a short time, hopefully permanently. That's what's good in this work.
It sounds incredibly purposeful. There's a question coming for me out of what you've said, thinking about sense making, group collective sense making, and how that seems to work well in the context of autism dialogue, but it's also something that a lot of people are saying we actually need more widely anyway. Like, we need to develop the capacity to get back to basics and engage in collective sense making as groups. And part of both of those things seems to be the meeting of those diverse perspectives and those ways of being. And there's a lot of talk these days about including different backgrounds, perspectives. We want to get the female perspective, the male perspective, the sexual minority perspective, the racial minority perspective. But when it comes to other kinds of diversity, ontological diversity is what I would call it, diversity in ways of being, seeing, and knowing, that's still not really considered a priority, and it sounds like bringing
Yeah.
this sense making in is going to be that melding and merging of those different ways of being and seeing, which, if we take it seriously, is going to have a bit of a dissolving effect on the dominant shared paradigm of reality, because there's going to be these very different ones coming in.
Yeah,
And
it's a proud claim, though, isn't it? But I can understand your point, and like the transferability, I think, is what comes up for me. And if we're talking about all the different diversities, how many diversities are there? Well, there's 300,000 different kinds of flower, right? And it's not that the flowers are all correct and the weeds are in the wrong. It's already a great big, multiplicity of flowers. That's what neurodiversity is. It's a human biodiversity, and whether it's skin color, orientation, way of being, way of thinking, way of perceiving, my perspective, the experience of being me isn't the same as you, and it'll never be, and you'll never understand my experience of being me. That's nature. And so when we the ontology of a dialogue is precisely that. And it feels, in a way, it feels quite abstract and almost like metaphysical, ungraspable, but in another way it's extremely obvious and practical. But the thing about autism, doing it with autism, and before you even get to intersectionality and other oppressed diversities a person may be embodying, before you even get to that, autism is the self. Well, I have to work with this paradigm of autistic and non-autistic, and that's caused me quite a lot of problems, because I'm already setting up an idea that there is such a thing. Well, I didn't create it anyway. All I'm doing is facilitating circles where people can come together. If we carry on working this way, and if we can carry on growing it and getting more facilitators and more dialogue circles under the kind of the thing about autism, then perhaps we'll have an effect on the rest of the fragmentation of consciousness. And when I go out and I see a black person in the road or a trans person, and I feel my woo, I know that it's institutional, I know that it's societal consciousness, it's not me. So that's where we can meet. Yes, there's a difference here. There's a difference, but is it really a difference? No, because it's completely different and completely the same at the same time. So we're consciousness raising. That's to use the old term. That's what the work is aimed to be.
Yeah, well, it's not a little bit about the kinds of conversations I have on SENSESPACE, and it's very much with the view to integrating these practical day-to-day engagements with a metaphysical understanding, with the sense that there is a landscape of consciousness that's available to us, and it's not just flat, but there are kind of different depths or different levels that we can dwell in, and that can shift a hell of a lot in how we experience our lives and how we engage with one another and how we perceive one another. So it doesn't feel inconsequential or like just an aside. It feels like there is a kind of deep spiritual root to the way that you're engaging in this, and the sort of in a way like a non-dual approach, like when you go in and you don't have, like, perhaps a traditional therapeutic framework would be, I'm going to have my sort of book in the back of my head and I'm reading you, and then I'm looking for where you fit into the proper box. And then with that box, maybe there's a set of solutions, and then I'm going to assign those solutions to you, and you can go away with your proper prescribed treatment. And then there's something quite different, which is to really go in blank in a certain sense, in that state of listening, and to let the medicine that is to be found to reveal itself through the process and through the other person.
Well, is it revealing it through the meeting of persons? Because this is what, is that what you mean? Because this is Hannah's, the participatory sense making is there are three elements to a relationship. There's me and you, and there's what's going on, what's emerging between us. So if I can affect the field with that you're talking about, I think it's the nameless goal of all life is just purity. And if we can affect the field, then it's not a selfish thing. It's not something we can own or claim. And that's part of what we have to be wary about. I think that well, let me ask you, do you think something new is being created, or are we rediscovering old, the fundamental, the spiritual, as you call it?
That is a really interesting, deep question. I experience it to be a both. It does feel
right
like a
answer.
lot. Yeah, both and. Yeah, it feels like indigenous. The word indigenous means a lot for me. And it feels like a lot of my journey has been to like reopen to more indigenous qualities of my way of being as a human, deconditioning, getting down to roots, connecting with my gut, connecting with my belly, my heart, and those ways of knowing. And when I do,
do you know what the word indigenous means? Because I haven't looked at the etymology, or straight away.
No,
I think about Canada and email signatures of people I'm communicating with. These lands have been possessed by, and they still belong to, and then they name the tribes, and I think that's amazing. So yeah, I don't know really about the word indigenous at the core.
Yeah, well, yes, there's certainly multiple meanings to it, and one of them is very particular, as you say. I guess when I use it, I'm alluding to as you say, I mean, particularly in the world of psychedelics, people will have experiences where the context of being, I'm a human, at the end of the 21st century, with all of the particularities of this time and this way of seeing, all of that can actually give way in certain moments, and you can experience yourself in relation to nature and in relationship to another human being in a way that really has a kind of primordial quality. Sort of feels like Adam and Eve in the garden, if you want to take a Christian or metaphor for it. So it's about getting down to wisdoms and intelligences that we all possess, getting down to soul and getting down to like music. People think, you have to have a musical talent to connect with music. And my feelings, actually, music is more, indigenous to our humanness, and that we get down to it by getting things out of the way, so to speak, connecting with soulfulness. But then I do feel that we're in a sort of evolutionary moment, in a planetary evolution moment, and that there are new things coming down into our consciousness, and the quality of our consciousness is somehow shifting to accommodate a new way of being and new levels of understanding.
Yeah.
And it's going to have to, because we're in an absolutely novel situation as well.
Okay.
AI and so on.
Okay.
I did have another question, just drawing it a little bit back to your work around, what happens outside of the autism dialogue for you, and how you attend to yourself and how you attend to your life. Like, what are the ways of being and living that are most affording of you? What's the life that's most affording of being able to show up as you show up, in the moment of that dialogue, and be just open to what wants to emerge?
Being in the dialogue, or living my life externally? I'm not sure what the question.
Yeah, the question is around your life outside of the dialogue. Yeah, how you tend to your own soul, your own consciousness, your practices, your your way of life, how that all feeds back in.
Yeah. Well, what comes to mind is something somebody, a participant in one of the, I was doing slightly reluctantly doing a support group, and because charity I was working for, I don't think they fully grasped what the Autism Dialogue model was. So they asked me to kind of provide a kind of a hybrid, a support group. So I tried my best to bring some dialogue principles into it, and it worked to some degree. And a guy said to me at the end of a block of about 10 sessions, he said to me, "So, can I ask you a question, Jonny? What is your view of us? What happens to us now?" And it was brilliant, because it put me right on the spot. And the whole time that I've been facilitating those groups, thinking that I'm providing some support, it completely flipped, it backflipped, because I thought, what have I been doing for these people? What have I been doing? Providing a space, weekly space for them to come together and connect with each other and share issues and stuff. But it came to an end, and that's the humility that kicks in. You think, well, what is the value of this? What really is the value? Am I completely wasting my time? Who says there's any value in what I'm doing? We turn to scientific research, and there's a lot of value in that, ascribing value to data and outcomes, and I prefer evaluations, that rather than rigorous scientific data. Just, I don't know. It's just, I'm not that guy, I thought I was going to be a researcher at some point, and I might end up still doing, something. But I like it to be really, really practical and down to earth. I think dialogue's it's got to be intensely practical. And so when it comes to supporting people, making tea, and making sure, like, being obvious, people feel welcomed, into a space. They're just as important as allowing or facilitating a conversation about one person's family issues or another obvious, like, masking conversations, when we start to get a little bit about, the concepts of autism and personal stuff. I think I'm kind of wavering away from your question a little bit. And what I appreciate about you is just being given the time to think, until we ask these questions, because they are too fleeting. The answers to these kind of questions. What is it, the value of my life? And I think the pace of society has got a lot to answer for in that. The importance of stopping, and that might not mean having a regular meditation practice or communicating sincerely with friends and colleagues and loved ones, but it might just be a moment in a supermarket with somebody who looks a bit lost, who can't find their thing, and you can't find cashiers these days in supermarket. I mean, staff. It's difficult to find staff to ask nowadays. I've noticed. But there was a guy, I was driving down the road the other day, and there was a guy on quite a fast stretch of road, and he pulled in, and half of his car was like against the hedge, and he was looking. He's got out and he's looking in the hedge, and I just thought, there could be an issue there. What's wrong with the guy? Could be anything. And so I stopped. I just slowed down because I drive a big white van, converted van. Put my hazard lights on. No, everybody can see me. I stopped on the other side and I shouted, "Are you all right?" And I use a local dialect. "Are you all right, fella?" So there's a little bit of parlance, and he knows, he understands me straight away. And he just turned around, he smiled, and said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And he was just like rummaging in the hedge on this long stretch of road. And that's my job done. And my wife said to me, "You're so kind." And I'm like, well, there could have been something seriously wrong, but it's in that moment, just helping another, human being. And what is another human being anyway? It's not just a biological blob. We are just blobs, but we're all the same thing, aren't we? That's, for me, like, that's an opportunity to, like, help someone out. Apparently someone else. It's the same thing. It's all connected. Everything's connected. So I wouldn't say I'll look out for opportunities like that, but if they present themselves, like, there's no question, being in service of other humans. And I hate people as well. I really can't stand people. I hate being around too many people. Most people are nice. Somebody said that to me a few years ago. Most people are all right. And that was reassuring. But I get very overwhelmed by too many people. And some people irritate me because of mannerisms, because of, assumptions. And I'm just like one of those sensitive types. In some lands, I might be called the snowflake, I think. I don't know. I'm not sure. What else? I enjoy just being me, playing my guitar, relaxing, watching films. But there's still a spiritual pursuit for that for that moment where you suddenly realize what all life is, you know. And we're all looking for that. If we can find that, and it happens, you know, then and you disappear and you lose yourself, and you know, whatever God or whatever you call it takes over, and like the ultimate purpose to everything is just like, psh. If that happens, it's extremely rare, but you know, I think that's what drives me. That's what drives me along. So it's weird, isn't it? Because in a religious terminology, there's like a currency. Like the more good deeds you do, the quicker you get to heaven, and the la 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 la. But actually, I think there's some truth in that, because it makes you feel good, doesn't it? Helping other people, and then if you feel good, you're healthier, you know. And yeah, you took me on a proper little journey there.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that answer. And I love the it's very beautiful to be just available to life in that way as
Yeah.
it presents itself. And that seems to be a big part of the way that the mystical path unfolds in some way is through just being the person on the street who's actually attending to what's going on and what's arising. And you know, you can get in trouble being too open, of course, because all kinds of sketchy people will also perceive that you're open and want to engage with you. But I think that properly held openness and that availability to life is, you know, in the religious way of thinking about it, you're being open to God working through you in just a little act of kindness. And those experiences of continuity of connection with the whole of life are 100% what it's all about for me as well. And I believe and experience that it's possible to walk a path that leads to greater continuity of connection with that. And that is really cool, really fulfilling.
Yeah, it's really cool, and it's what you're doing now.
Yeah, I would say so. If we want to get down to the core of what this project's become and what the whole Culturepilgrim journey is about, it's about, you know, a journey where the destination is not going to be a particular place on planet Earth, but it's going to be a place of being in relationship to life.
I love the way, yeah, I love the way that you describe it. It's great. It's unique, you know. I've not heard anybody use this kind of terminology that you use. Very heartfelt descriptions of yeah. Because with me it's like the culture pilgrim, and you know, the being not the place. And I've still got a few of the old religious kind of phraseology from my Sufi days, you know, service, and but what did you call it? Being available to what's needed in the street, that kind of thing. Like, oh yeah, more like humanistic kind of language. To a lot of people, that'll be oh yeah, that's what we call charity, da 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 da, humanist kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. But I like the way you present.
Well, I really appreciate that, Jonny, and I do feel that the translation across these paradigms and ways of thinking about life is really important too. So I kind of commend you when you're doing that in terms of your Sufi background and then bringing it into you know, a common parlance for people. It feels really important as well.
yeah. And if yeah, every now and then I get a message that says, "You've really helped me," and that's it. That's a golden moment. Yeah, I've got a few of those. Thankfully, I've got a few of those that just, yeah, assure me that I can keep going for a bit on this journey.
Yeah, wonderful blessings. Thank you so much, Jonny, for joining for this conversation and exploration. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, same. Likewise. Thanks a lot.